Welcome to Dr. P.C. Verma Economics class on YouTube channel. Today, we will discuss a type of inflation created by PPI. What is PPI? PPI means Producer Price Index. The price change continuously termed as inflation. So there are many types of inflation. Inflation caused by many factors. Inflation caused by many variables. And its name is coined. There are more than 15, 16 types of inflation are in practice in different countries of the world. In the United States of America, this Producer Price Index, PPI, is most important in the field of calculation of price variations in the American economy. In India, CPI is very famous, Consumer Price Index number. But American economy is pinpointing on the production point and pinpointing at the production point that in the economy, Producer Price Index, PPI, measures the average change over time in the selling prices that domestic producers receive for their output. PPI is very, very important in American economy because it measures inflation, effect of inflation in a very sharp way, and accuracy is there. PPI means Producer Price Index. Producer Price Index measures the average change over time in the selling prices that domestic producers receive for their output. What does it mean? It means PPI measures the average change in the selling price that domestic producers receive for their output. It is a measure of inflation at the wholesale level that is compiled from thousands of indexes, measuring producers' prices by industry and product category. The index is published monthly by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. The Producer Price Index is different from Consumer Price Index, which measures changes in the price of goods and services paid by the consumer. So you can find out that PPI is related to measuring producer's price by industry and product category. Whereas CPI, Consumer Price Index, which measures the changes in the price of goods and services paid by consumer. First, you examine the inflationary trend and its cost position and its variation at production level. Then there is more accuracy. Because if you want to measure inflation at consumer level, when consumer purchase goods and services from the producer, this is the last stage. And in this case, there may be charging higher prices from the consumer. But when data is collected about the cost and different aspects related to production. Then the producers have to be careful, and government officials will examine different types of indexes. You have collected many raw materials, and raw materials are the basis of production in industries and organizations. So in United States of America, in order to find out the accuracy in the variations in price and the rate of inflation, they have decided that we should follow the measure of inflation at wholesale price or at wholesale level and at producers level. Whereas in India, inflation is calculated at consumers level. In producers level, it is easy to find out because each production is related to some index. And the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes monthly all index. Thousands of indexes are there published every month. You cannot hide anything. So PPI, Producer Price Index, is a measure of inflation. PPI index, PPI, Producer Price Index, is a measure of inflation at the wholesale price that is compiled by thousands of indexes measuring producers' prices by industry and product category. This is in the United States of America. What is in India? In India, we are following the CPI. Their PPI, we follow CPI. CPI means Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index measures the changes in price of goods and services paid by consumers. Whether you want to check at producers level or you want to check at consumers level, choice is yours. In the USA, inflation is very important. You know, today I have written about the Biden inflation. Inflation is a type of taxation. Inflation is not a small thing. You know, in every interview and written examination, there is few questions from inflation. Inflation is talked too much nowadays in USA. Higher inflation caused because of COVID and because of other factors, extra spending by the government, whatever may be the cause, natural cause. But this pumping of money into the economy would led to the inflation. I have given a list of 18 inflation. Any inflation will come under this act. Pumping of money, supply of money, monetary inflation. So Producers Price Index, PPI, is a measure of inflation at a wholesale price level that is compiled from thousands of indexes measuring producer prices by industry and product category. And this index is published monthly by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. On the other hand, in India, what happens? In India, more stress on CPI, Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index is that index which is measured at consumers level. Last point. CPI, Consumer Price Index, measures the changes in the price of goods and services paid by the consumer. USA follow PPI index, knowing about the inflation in the American economy. At present, America is also facing higher inflation in the USA, and opposition parties citing, saying that widened inflation, this is widened inflation. In our country also, many of the leaders cited price rise, inflation. You will surprised to see the before independence, in a meeting, Subhash Chandra Bose was president of the Congress committee at that time. And in his lecture, what I see, that he say, the problem of price rise and unemployment is the main problem of the Indian economy. We have to fight it. We have to remove it. This was before independence. And after independence, again, after so many 70 plus years, the problem of inflation, problem of high price rise, it is because it is backed by money supply. I had shown in previous lecture that in 1973, lecturer was getting 535 rupees per month. Government lecturer, government from BPSC, from UPSC. If you join their post, permanent post, you will get monthly 535. But at that time in 1973, the price of gold was 250 rupees 10 grams. Now, Bihar government appointed many lecturers for BPSC. They pay 66,000 per month. And gold price is 71,000 per 10 gram. It means by 1 month's salary, that lecturer cannot buy 10 gram gold. But in 1973, lecturer getting 535, and the price of gold was 250 per 10 gram. In terms of gold, 20 gram gold was 1 month's salary. Today, you getting 60,000, 66,000, but you can't buy 20 gram gold. This is called money supply inflation. This is called money supply inflation. If money is pumped too much in the economy for faster development and for industrialization, for larger scale industry, we all know that in larger scale industry, huge amount of money is required, and that are taken from the banks, different institutions, Indian and outside. And this will directly lead to the supply of money increment and price rise. So producer price index inflation, you must be aware of the fact, and you must be able to differentiate between production price index number and consumer price index number, and compare that. In India, we have consumer price index number, where inflation is measured, consumer price index number, which measures the changes in the price of goods and services paid by consumer. Last point. Whereas today in the USA, they are shouting, opposition party were shouting against Biden and calling this high inflation is Biden inflation. No many Biden inflation. Therefore, PPI is a measure of inflation at the wholesale level that is compiled from the thousands of indexes measuring producer prices by industry and product category. The product price index PPI measures the average change over time average change over time in the selling price selling price in the selling prices that domestic producers that domestic producers receive for their output. For their output. The prices included the prices included in the PPI, in the PPI are from the first commercial transaction are from the first commercial transaction. Commercial transaction. For many products or for many products and some services, and some services. PPI is a measure of inflation. At the at the wholesale level. Wholesale level, that is compiled that is compiled from thousands of from from thousands from thousands of indexes indexes measuring measuring producer prices, measuring producer prices by industry, and product category. Product category. The PPI is published monthly. Monthly by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Statistics BLS. The PPI is different. PPI is different from the the consumer price index, CPI, which measures which measures which measures the changes in the price of goods and services paid by consumer. Paid by paid by consumer paid by consumers. The PPP, producer price index, is different from the consumer price index because consumer price index measures the changes in the price of goods and services paid by consumer. The producer price index is a measure of the change in prices that domestic producer domestic producer domestic producers receive for their goods and services for their goods and services services. The index is a measure the index is a measure of wholesale inflation wholesale inflation. The PPI is a measure of wholesale price index. Wholesale PPI is a measure of wholesale inflation. PPI is a measure of wholesale inflation. Wholesale inflation. And and the producer price index is an indicator of the of the health indicator of the health of the economy. The producer price index producer price index looks at looks at inflation from the view from the viewpoint of industry and business. This method measures this this method measures price changes before consumer before before consumers purchase. Final goods. Final goods and services. As as a result, many analysts consider consider it to predict inflation. As a result, many analysts consider it to predict inflation before the CPI. Difference difference between UPI and CPI. both the CPI both the CPI and the PPI measure inflation from the inflation. PPI measures inflation measures inflation from the viewpoint of the producer of the producers from the viewpoint of the producers. The average selling price average selling price average selling price they receive they receive for their output for their output over a period of time over a period of time. They receive measures inflation from the viewpoint of producers. The average selling price they receive for their output over a period of time. The CPI measures inflation from the viewpoint of the consumer, of the consumer. The value of a basket of goods and goods and goods and service, goods and services that a consumer have, that a consumer goods and services, that a basket of goods and services and basket of goods and services that consumers have bought, that 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 consumers have bought over a period of time, over a period of time. FD ID First demand. First demand and intermediate FDID, first demand, intermediate demand. First demand, intermediate demand, FDID. The PPI report publishes more than 600 FDID indexes. The first demand intermediate demand indices use the commodity use the is the commodity indexes organized by product to measure producer prices. Producer prices based on on the economic identity, the economic identity economic identity of the buyer, of the buyers, and whether the goods whether the whether the goods sold require require further processing, further processing. The final demand indexes, the final demand indexes a distinct a final demand indexes as distinct distinct from the intermediate, from the intermediate demand demand ones are then used are then used to arrive at the headline, to arrive at the arrive at the arrive at the headline. Headline headline PPI number which reflects the PPI for final product. Commodity classification. Commodity classification. Classification disregards commodity classification disregards the producer's industry. Producers industry to group industry to group out to group out to group out to group industry to group output based on the nature, based on the nature, based on the nature of the product. Of the product. Nature of the product. Based on the nature of the product or service. The PPI report publishes report publishes PPI report publishes more than more than more than more than 3.8 more than 3.80 commodity price commodity price indexes. Indexes for for goods and some 900 for services. Features and Features and characteristics. Character. Thus, thus we conclude here that the PPI index number, its features and characteristics, which we tried to write down, but technical problem. So I speak that the producer price index measures the change in the prices paid to US producers of goods and services. Number one. Number two, The PPI is a measure of wholesale price, while the consumer price index number measures the prices paid by the consumer. Number 3, the index is published monthly by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the USA. In the case of USA, PPI index are calculated based on products and services in the industries and the buyer's economic identity, which are used to calculate the overall monthly change in final demand PPI. The indexes calculate price changes in private contracts based on supplier input prices. So, features and characteristics, I speak to you, it will not be written because of certain technical fault. Number 1, producer price index measures the change in the prices paid to US producers of goods and services. Number 2, the PPI is a measure of wholesale inflation, while the consumer price index number measures the prices paid by the consumers. Number 3, the index is published monthly by Bureau of Labor Statistics. Number 4, the PPI indexes are calculated based on products and services, industry, and the buyer's economic identity, which are used to calculate the overall monthly change in final demand PPI. The index says PPI indexes calculate price changes in private contracts based on suppliers' input prices. So all these 5 characteristics and feature of PPI, we have discussed inside the story all these facts, but here I have categorized under 5 points. First point, the producer price index measures the change in the prices paid to US producer of goods and services. Number 2, the PPI is a measure of wholesale inflation. Very important. PPI is a measure of wholesale inflation, while the consumer price index number measures the prices paid by the consumers. Number 3, the index, PPI index is published monthly by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. PPI indexes are calculated based on products and services, industry, and the buyer's economic identity, which are used to calculate the overall monthly change in the final demand. And lastly, the index in the PPI index calculate price changes in private contracts based on suppliers' input prices. So these are the features and characteristics of PPI inflation. Thus, we come to the conclusion that in the economy of USA, one term is very popular, FD-ID. FD-ID means, FD means final demand, ID means intermediate demand. FD-ID index, 600, more than 600 reports are published by PPI related to FD-ID, means final demand dash intermediate demand, so that at last you will take into consideration the final product while you are publishing PPI for this period. That's all. Thank you. Again, like every time I say that like it, subscribe it, and comment it, because it is a type of pleasure of a speaker, writer, economist to see comments on the matter. Comments means positive comments. What is positive finding in it? How far it is useful to you? How can you utilize it? And in general discussion, you put the matter and you discuss what is the difference between PPI and CPI. In a developed country, a stress on PPI, and like ours country, a stress on CPI. What is the difference between two? I have shown in this class, and you discuss among friends. That's all. Thank you.